about live scope and electronics and should he use it, should he not, and it's pretty interesting. And we'll let you guys hear Randy's opinion from the Bass Talk Live podcast. But with all of that, Randy, one question I have for you is: do you plan on getting a live scope on your boat to use in this off season, or are you just gonna kind of double down on no live scope?
Well, I think that Jonny and I've talked. We're definitely going to spend some time this winter using his live scope jerkbait fishing. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that after I fish with you with that on a jerkbait setup, that I'll definitely want one. I might wait and see. I know that Hummingbird's coming out with, Lowrance came out with one. Hummingbird's coming out with a forward-facing sonar. I'll probably take your lead on the advice on which model to get, but I see one in my future. I don't think that you can get around it in certain situations. I don't think it's a necessity. I think you can still compete. This year on the Bassmaster Opens, every fish I caught was with 2D sonar. If I would have landed the fish that bit me, I'd have made the Elite Series. So you can compete without one. But there are some tournaments, just like the Lake Hartwell Bassmaster Open we fished, the Toyota Series at Table Rock here recently, that you simply cannot win without it. That when the fish are set up like that, got to use it. And if I want to continue growing, yeah, I've got to get one. So it's probably in my future. Yeah.
It's interesting stuff, and we'll be showing more videos.
And I want to preface that I'm going to be fighting and kicking it the whole way, getting it. Just got to do it, man.
We'll be making a bunch of videos about the live scope, but obviously we're not going to be making every video about the live scope. And actually, it's interesting because I've been using the live scope now for about 4 or 5 months now, and I find that there are times when I get so dialed into it that I completely forget how to just go out and catch him without it. And there's times when I literally stop myself and I think, okay, let's turn the live scope off. Let's go back to just 2D sonar, side imaging, down imaging, and I still feel like I'm better at catching fish without the live scope just because that's how I've done it my entire career. I'm trying to learn how to do it with the live scope as well, but honestly, I feel like you have to find that balance between when to use it and when to just get back to fishing without it, and how to incorporate it into a regular fishing strategy, which I'll be talking about a lot in upcoming videos of how to incorporate it while also maybe not needing it, and how you can fish without it versus fishing with it. So every video we're going to do going forward, we'll explain, here's the live scope method, here's the non-live scope method, because I feel like live scope is going to be pretty much a must-have if you're going to be a tournament fisherman, especially as the technology is out for 2-3 years and then it starts to decrease in cost. I think that it will decrease in cost over the next 2-3 years. Once all 3 manufacturers have it, they'll come out with a less expensive version of live scope, and I don't think it'll be as big of a deal. But learning it now is going to be definitely important, and we're going to be making videos about that so you guys can at least stay up in the loop. Even if you don't have it, you can still learn about it before you get it in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Well, that's all I want to talk about on that. Don't want to spend too much time on all those topics because I know that you spend a lot of time on Bass Talk Live talking about that. I want to jump straight into the topic for this live stream, and that is how to win a bass fishing tournament. And there were 5 reasons I laid out last week, or basically 5 skills that I said pros have that the average angler does not. And I want to run through that list with you, Randy, first to get your opinion on each of these, and then see if maybe I have it wrong, because I'm obviously not a professional fisherman. I'm not on a tour. These are just my observations. And also get your list of your top 5 reasons why you feel like you would win a tournament. So the first item on my list was that pros fail fast. What I meant by that is basically, if I share my screen here, just to kind of recap for those who weren't on the stream last week, is that a pro is able to go to a lake like a Grand Lake, for example, and they're able to quickly identify what the primary patterns are that allow them to catch really good quality tournament fish. And they're not going to try to fish one technique for an entire day of practice when it's not working. They are going to experiment with a lot of different areas of the lake, whether it's the main lake, back of the creek. They're going to change different baits, different retrieves, and they're going to fail quickly, only spending 15 to 20 minutes maybe on a certain bait or a certain retrieve or a certain technique. And they're going to constantly change and adapt until they lock into a really good pattern they can find. And that's something that I've seen with all the best anglers that I've fished with, all the pros I've fished with, is that they're able to eliminate patterns and techniques aren't working 10 times faster than the average angler. And so one example I gave was, let's say you go out in the Grand Lake, and in the first 2 hours of a fishing day, I would say that I would be able to cover, for example, fishing the main lake with a variety of baits, fishing the back of this creek and fishing maybe the middle of these pockets. And I should be able to eliminate this whole section of the lake with different techniques in different sections in about 2 hours and determine, is this the right section of the lake to be fishing, or should I run further towards the dam, further up towards the north part of the lake? What bait should I be fishing? Should I be fishing fast baits, slow baits, all these things? And in 2 hours, I should be able to get my first hint at what's going on. Would you agree with all that, Randy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's being able to make that quick decision is key, because we operate in tournaments under a time frame. So it's not necessarily about finding the fish is that difficult. It's finding the fish in the time frame that you have to find them, and then catching them in the time frame that you have to find them. And if, like I said, if you know when to give up on something or to stay with something, that's a huge thing that only comes with experience.
Yeah, it's definitely time on the water. That is the biggest challenge with any of these reasons why the pros are better. These are not skills that you can pick up right off the bat. It's not like you're going to be able to go do this and determine it in a week. It's years of experience, but there are ways you can, like I talked about in the last stream, to set yourself up for success. So spending 15 to 20 minutes doing one thing and then making that conscious effort to change and do something different, even if it's in your nature just to keep fishing down the bank and just keep enjoying the day. If you want to be successful, you have to force yourself to make that change. And over time, you'll kind of adapt and learn that style. So next one I had here, Randy, was focusing on your strengths. That's one thing pros are really good at. And it's not that they're, like in your case, Randy, you kind of take it to the extreme more than a lot of pros, where you focus a lot on the shallow water fishing, specifically the dirtier water fishing. So if you're on Grand, you're going to spend a lot of time up in the dirtier water up here. If I pull up Navionics, you're going to spend more time up here in the dirtier water finding those fish that are going to bite crankbaits, spinnerbaits, and jigs, regardless of the time of year and regardless of whether there's maybe a really good offshore bite, because you know that you could probably find some fish up shallow and catch them year round, as opposed to maybe a pro that is both good at offshore and shallow, but they don't necessarily, not every pro is good at every offshore technique or every shallow water technique. One example I gave was with Jacob Wheeler. He is great at a lot of different techniques, but he's maybe not the best, for example, drop shotter on the tour. He's maybe really good at deep diving crankbaits, hair jigs, and swim baits. And so if there's an offshore bite with those techniques, he's going to go to that. But if he can't find those techniques on the lake, he'll then go to his shallow water strengths, maybe a buzz bait, flipping a creature bait, skipping a jig in dirtier water, and he'll be versatile within his playbook of strengths. He's not going to just randomly start drop shotting if he's maybe not the best drop shotter on tour. And that's just an example. He might be really good at drop shotting, but does that make sense to you, Randy?
Yeah, and when you talk about the topic of versatility versus strength, here's the deal. What's going to happen? You're going to have like a super angler that is, they don't have any strengths because everything is their strength. Because right now, versatility keeps people from winning a lot of tournaments, because if you know too much and if you're good at a lot of things, but you're not great at a few things, it's very difficult to win a tournament unless you're a master at a specific technique in today's fishing. So I think what anglers have to remember is they got to be really careful when they decide if they want to be to focus in on some core strengths, or if they want to become a versatile angler. They got to be really careful as far as when it comes to winning tournaments. Now, versatility goes a long way when it comes to consistency over the course of the season, like in a points race. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to winning tournaments, putting big bags of fish together in a boat, you don't hardly ever see these guys that are not masters at specific techniques to win tournaments. It happens occasionally, but not very often.
Yeah, being a master at one technique is really important. And a lot of times you do really well as a tournament angler if you win a tournament every 3 years. It's not like you need to win every single year. So a lot of times it takes, if there's 8 tournaments in the schedule, it might take 3 years, 24 tournaments for one tournament to set up in your one of your strengths where you can actually win. So it's not like you're going to be able to win all the time, because the guys who, like you said, the guys who win, they are masters at the techniques that they are using. They basically, the tournament scenario and the conditions line up perfectly for their strengths, and they know when to swing for the fence on that tournament, or take a swing at the bat for the home run. And then you also have to realize that there's times when maybe you just have to go shoot for a middle of the field finish. That's kind of, I feel like, how a lot of pros do it to get the checks. It's a lot more strategy than just trying to go out and win every tournament. I don't think, do most pros go out trying to win every tournament, Randy? I feel like they say they do, but I don't feel like that's true.
I don't think they do. I think everybody has, when they go to a tournament, they have like they have like a dream to win the tournament. But what happens is that dream turns into reality real quick when what you think is going to produce a possible win does not manifest, and you're basically, like you said, you're scrambling to get a check. So normally the winning patterns are the most difficult ones to really put together and make happen and make work. A lot of people give up on them real quick if they don't produce, but that's why a lot of people just go out and they're happy to get checks in tournaments, because it's hard to find those winning fish. I mean, winning tournaments is a hard thing to do, especially in bass tournaments, because like you said, most circuits only have 7 or 8 tournaments a year, whereas like in professional golf, they got 30 or 40 tournaments a year, opportunities to win and they don't have the uncontrolled variables that fishing has. So when you combine not very many tournaments, uncontrolled variables, super stiff competition, winning a tournament it's super special and super hard to do. I don't care who it is. You look at Kevin Van Dam, Clun, Roland Martin, some of the greatest fishermen of all time. Look at the percentage of tournaments they fished versus the ones they've won. It's pathetic. When you want to compare that to other sports. So
yep,
that's why I always say this is the toughest sport in the world. Pro fishing is the toughest sport in the world.
It's not like tennis or golf or something like that, where a guy can go on just a tear and win 3 tournaments a year and they're in their prime, shape, and it's just like they go.
Yeah, they don't have to worry about a prop shaft spinning off or throwing a blade on a prop running to weigh in that costs you a tournament. Those variables don't exist over there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, by the way, guys, I wanted to say hi to everyone in the stream. Sorry, I was so excited to start the stream. I didn't say hi to everyone. We got William, Randy, John, Gary, Timo, TC, Carolina Bass Hunter, Jessica, John, Jeff. Got a ton of people in here. Appreciate everyone tuning into the stream. Sorry for not acknowledging you guys earlier. There's a little bit of a scuffle going on in the live stream too, guys. Let's just keep it chill in the live stream chat. The question is about if I could compete as a professional angler, Randy. We've talked about this before. Basically, I'll let you respond to that first, Randy, if I have the skills to be able to compete as a professional. We talk about this all the time, so I don't want to dwell on it too much, but what are your thoughts there?
What was the question again?
If I could compete on like a pro tour, like if I could fish the Elite Series or FLW or something like that.
If one of the listeners could compete?
No, if I could compete.
Oh, if you could compete. Absolutely. Yeah. Here's the thing, guys. For everybody listening in this podcast, I can tell you I'm a really good judge of talent. I've been around it my whole career. Jonny, and I'm not trying to build his ego up here. I'm just being realistic. What the deal is, Jonny could compete at the top level in the sport. The only reason he doesn't is he chooses not to. He really loves what he's doing. He's passionate about it. That's the thing. He loves what he's doing, so he has no desire to travel around the country, stay in strange motels, drive 40,000 miles a year. But that doesn't take away of his ability to excel in the tournament. Let's put it this way. I've qualified for 18 Forest Wood Cups, Bassmasters Classic. I've won Bassmaster tournaments. I won almost $2 million fishing. And we've had like 12 challenges in the last 6 months. And he's beat me 11 out of the 12 times. So proof is in the pudding there. So, yes, to answer your question, yeah, he could compete and take everybody's money if he wanted to.
And really the thing I think that we're talking about here too, I hear Gary, he's not saying that I couldn't compete skill wise. It's just a matter of want to. Because one thing about tournament fishing too is you have to be 100% committed to it. And that's the reason I stopped tournament fishing, is because you have to give your all to it. It's not one of those deals where you can kind of tournament fish a little bit and then do some stuff on the side. We've seen so many guys, even like a Kevin Van Dam, who has now transitioned to Major League Fishing, and he's not nearly as competitive as he was when he was dominant on the tour because he has other priorities. He's doing commercials, TV shows, businesses, all these things. It's so hard to have other priorities other than fishing because it's such an all-consuming activity. So could I go out right now and compete on the tour? Absolutely not, because my head isn't there, and I would need to think through how to get my head in like that competitive space and fishing for 4 days for a living. If I spent a year prepping for it, I probably could. But there's something that you have to have in your brain too, that it's like that competitive instinct. In fishing, I feel like it's even more because you have to be so dialed in. You can't let other things in life get in your head because you can spin out so easy. And it's way more mental than actual skill. Like, do I know all the patterns and the techniques? Sure, I know all the different patterns. I've caught fish doing pretty much everything, every way you could catch them. The guys won a tournament the last 25 years, all over the country. But the mental side of it and just being tuned in, that's one of the reasons it's hard to win tournaments, is you have to be so dialed in, especially over 4 days. It's even harder. So that kind of ties in with the conversation as well. But would you agree with all that, Randy?
Oh, absolutely. And it's about it. You can't substitute time on the water because, a lot of these guys that are at the top of their game, and they usually get in their top of the game, like in their mid 30s, that type of stuff, because they have a combination of the intellectual knowledge, the intuition strong. Their family life does not put a lot of demands on them as far as the time. So they have a lot of things in their life that come together that allow them to have that intense focus. And what happens in different periods of your life as you get older or you're younger, you have a lot of things that pull you in different directions. And that's just part of life. I mean, that's just something you can't avoid unless somebody wants to be a single hermit that doesn't have any social life, that doesn't have any family, and they just wake up and eat, sleep, and breathe fishing. But there's more to life than fishing. I mean, there's the human experience goes well beyond that. So that's pretty rare.
Yeah, it's just one of those deals where pro fishing is not all that it's cracked up to be. I think they make it look like it's this glamorous deal. It's not glamorous by any means, and it's just it's crazy. You've talked about this, Randy. Guys, 20% of guys are actually making money at fishing. The rest of them are breaking even, or they have $50,000 in credit card debt. Like, it's bad. And so it's just different. I mean, for me, all I care about is fishing and teaching about fishing. And I enjoy the theoretical and the educational side of it. And I feel like I can provide a lot of info there because there's not that many people who actually have the ability to get paid to literally analyze what the pros do and figure all that out, because the pros aren't going to share it. Why would they share it? That's how they win. It's a competitive advantage. And even the stuff we're talking about today, guys, is just us. Well, Randy's fished for 30 years, so his list is going to be correct and he knows what's going on. My list is just based on what I've seen and what I've observed. So we're just trying to bring a little bit of clarity to the complexity of bass fishing. That's what we do at Fish at the Moment, and so that's kind of the deal. Let's get back to topics. The first two reasons I mentioned were that the pros fail fast and they focus on their strengths. The third is that I said pros are more efficient than your average angler. They're able to go, and if they make, let's say, 1,000 casts a day, 950 of them are going to be accurate presentations that are right on target where they need to be. Versus an average angler, they might make 1,000 casts and 500 of them land with like a big splash. They're off target, they're backlashing, whatever. And so a pro angler can be a lot more efficient, make more casts, and they just know what banks to even run. They won't fish an entire stretch of bank for 200 yards. They're able to pick out that 40-yard section of the bank that's key and run those all day, which makes them way more efficient than your average angler. And I think that is one of the biggest things that separates a professional from an average angler, is that level of efficiency. Would you agree there?
Yeah, just like you said, casting accuracy can go a long way, but it's almost like there's a dance that takes place on the water because you have to have in correlation, you have to have your casting rhythm and accuracy in correlation with your trolling motor manipulation, the speed of your boat, how you position your boat, the angle of your cast, the angle of your boat. You've got to be able to read the currents. You got to be able to read the wind as far as the mechanics of coming up on a piece of cover goes. And it's a true art form because you have to understand the momentum that your boat has moving forward. You don't want to backwash cover. You don't want to get too close. You don't want to get too far away from the cover. So one of the things that professional anglers have above everybody else, and I see this a lot just with people I fish with that don't fish a lot, is we have the ability to correlate the casting accuracy and the boat positioning together in a dance, like I said. And that's easier said than done because it takes a lot of practice. You have to know your equipment. You have to know a lot. It becomes a feel, but it almost like the trolling motor and your rod in your hand becomes an extension of your body. And professional anglers have that down pat.
Yeah, one thing I'll show you guys just to kind of explain that from a graphical perspective was what Randy's saying. Let's just say you're fishing down this stretch of bank right here on Grand Lake. You have this point here. What a pro is really able to do better than the average angler is they're able to determine 3 factors without even thinking. It's just second nature. One is what depth should they have their boat in? Should their boat be in 5 foot of water right up against the bank? Should the boat be in 35 feet of water further off the bank? The second thing is what the casting angle should be, which is what Randy mentioned. Should they be casting at a 45-degree angle to the bank, a 90-degree angle, or should they be casting perfectly parallel to the bank? And the third thing is they are very aware of where their bait is in the strike zone. So is their bait in 8 foot of water, 12 foot of water, 15 feet of water? Most anglers, even if they get down this bank, they might have their boat in up too close to the bank, too far off the bank. They're casting at the wrong angle. They're keeping their bait too shallow. Maybe you're fishing your bait in 3 to 5 foot of water and all the fish are in 8 to 12 foot of water and you miss all the fish, and a guy can come right behind you and catch a bunch of fish. And that's why I've never been too worried either about fishing behind other anglers, because a lot of times just having your boat in the right position and your bait in the right depth, different from what other anglers are doing, can trigger so many more bites, and it's so overlooked. I made a video about this actually on my channel, and like very few people actually watched it, which I was sad about, but it was about boat positioning, and that's something that's really crucial. So would you agree with that though, Randy, especially with like the fishing behind people sort of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just the subtle things about angle, speed, retrieve, just the fine details of the control variables of fishing. That's what separates the top level anglers from the weekend anglers. It's not these big things that you're talking about. It's every little thing that you talk about adds up. And what you were talking about, the angle that you approach the bank at, that is so critical because one of the things that happens that becomes second nature of professional anglers is based upon the angle of the bank they're fishing, the water temperature, the water clarity, the type of bait that they're using. They know just instinctively on how to set up on the bank as far as the proper angle. Angles have a huge part to play in generating strikes from bass. If you don't have the right angle, a lot of times you're never going to maximize the full potential of an area. And that's one of the things a pro can do quicker than anything is they can discern and identify the correct angles right off the bat. And there's a mix of a lot of different variables that add into that. There's a list of 20 things that you have to immediately take into consideration when you see that and you roll up onto it. And that's just something that you can't really learn other than experiencing it on the water.
For sure. Awesome. Okay, next is the fourth thing I had here. So we've gone through 3 so far. The fourth thing is that pros are able to adjust to fishing pressure. I think this is the most underrated skill of all pro anglers, and it's something admittedly I am not very good at. I am not great at adjusting to a bunch of other anglers in my area, and especially if you get like on the lake on a Saturday and maybe there's 2 100 boat tournaments out in the water. How do you adjust to that? Because the fish will change. They'll adjust based on where people are fishing, what baits they're throwing, all these different things, and a lot of guys just completely miss that factor. And you've said before in some of your videos, Randy, on your channel, that fishing pressure can have a bigger impact than the most severe cold front you'll ever see or a huge warming trend. That fishing pressure is huge. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, Randy?
Yeah, fishing pressure is it's one of the biggest realities in the sport of tournament fishing that there is. And when you're talking about fishing pressure, I mean, this we could talk for 3 hours just on fishing pressure. But okay, from a tournament perspective, how fishing pressure affects how you approach an area has a lot to do with the type of cover that you're fishing, because there's some types of cover that can absorb fishing pressure greater than others. If you're fishing like a lot of thick vegetation that extends out into the lake, or if you're fishing an area that has hundreds of flooded buckbrush or hundreds of laydowns, the fishing pressure is sort of absorbed within that cover. But if you're fishing an area that's like bare banks or isolated boat docks or riprap stretches, stuff like that, that doesn't have a lot of different hiding spots, fishing pressure can really be devastating, and you have to take that into consideration. But another thing about fishing pressure, there's two elements involved with it. It has to do with your mental attitude towards it, and specifically how you're approaching and how you're fishing an area. You have and one of the biggest cliches in bass fishing is that, oh, I was doing something a little bit different, or I was using a different bait. But that is the cliche that has a reality within fishing pressure, because that's the only way that you can compete in an area that's heavily fished or has a lot of heavily fishing pressure. It's a combination of retrieves, angles, bait colors, bait size, bait profiles. A lot of different things add up to that, and you really have to pay attention to what other anglers are doing. Prime example was at Lay Lake that we had last time there. The area that I was fishing up the river was getting hammered. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was getting hammered relentlessly. It was like take a number. So what I would do, and there was a lot of cover to fish along the bank, and it was people couldn't blow through an area because there was so much current that you couldn't work very fast. There was like a 4 or 5 mile an hour current, so it took forever to work up against the current. But what I would do is I would never get too close to a boat. I would always make sure that I tried to stay ahead of the pack or well behind the pack. I never wanted to get too close to a boat, and I tried to give those fish, a little bit different look, a little different angle, and try to penetrate some of that cover that a lot of people wouldn't go for. And that's the big key when you're dealing with fishing pressures. You have to be very aware of your competition, pay attention to what they're doing as much as to what you're doing, and if you can do that, it goes a long way to get more bites.
For sure. That's something that I want to do more videos with you on, Randy. We're actually going to make a dedicated fish the moment video on that, because there are so many factors to consider. And like I fished a lot of tournaments when I was younger, and from I probably fished 140 tournaments when the time I was like 9 years old till I was 21. And I didn't start understanding this fishing pressure aspect till probably the last 2 or 3 years of my tournament fishing. And I started getting it dialed in a little bit with like different bait selection, different situations like that. But honestly, that was the number one reason I found that I would struggle from going from a practice day to a tournament day. It wasn't that the conditions changed. It wasn't that I wasn't making the proper adjustments. It's just that I would get into an area and the normal adjustments I would make on a regular fishing day without other boats out there wouldn't work. Your normal instincts let's say you fish on a Wednesday and a Thursday back to back. The adjustments you make from a Wednesday to a Thursday with no fishing pressure, those adjustments will not work when you go from, let's say, a Wednesday to a Saturday. Because on Saturday, all those boats are around, and the changes you might make in retrieve, style of bait, all that stuff will not be as effective and will not produce the same results. And we're going to talk more about that in upcoming videos, because that is something that I want to learn more about. I'm going to pick Randy's brain. We might pick a few other pros as well to get some information there. I'll maybe bring another guest down to talk about that. And I think that's a crucial topic that is completely overlooked by a lot of anglers. And William says you have to fish the moment. It's true, you have to fish the moment. You also have to it's a lot of gamesmanship, honestly. Like figuring out what everyone else is doing something different, sneaking around, doing secret baits. There's a lot of crazy stuff, Randy. I'm sure that you know from the tour that people do. Do you have a story about that where guys go with a secret bait or doing something completely off the wall to win a tournament?
Well, a lot of times if I'm doing good in a tournament and there's a lot of boats fishing around me, say for example, if I'm fishing a crankbait and doing really good on a crankbait, if somebody will drive past me or get close to me, I'll just pretend like I'm fishing a jig. I'll never let them see what I'm actually doing if I feel that it's a really big deal. And I do that a lot with the jerk bait because everybody knows I fish a jerk bait on a spinning rod a lot. And if you see me out on the lake fishing a spinning rod out off the bank, like I'm fishing a shaky head, it's probably because I'm fishing a jerk bait and I'm just trying to pretend that I'm fishing a shaky head or something. So it's strategy, just like you said, and you learn to do that.
Well, that would backfire if you were fishing against me. I talked about this last week. What I used to do in tournaments is whenever I go down the bank, I would see what everyone else is throwing, like when they passed me by or when I was driving around, and I would pick up some bait that I never saw anyone throwing that day. And so probably what would happen is you would pretend like you're throwing a jig, and I'd be like, oh, he's throwing a jig. I need to throw a jerk bait. And then I would get on it. So maybe that was the right deal.
I'll tell you another one that happens a lot, which I do a lot too, is if you ever go down a bank and in practice or even or not a tournament, but in practice, and you see somebody with their storage compartments open, like they're digging for tackle. A lot of times, what I do if I've got a fish hooked or something, I'll just open the free spool or click the bell open on my spinning rod and let it swim out, open my rod locker or whatever, like I'm digging for tackle, so they don't see you fighting a fish. There's a lot of different tricks of the trade like that.
That's awesome.
So,
I've caught some.
Yeah,
I've caught some giant striper before in tournaments and had guys grab the net just to mess with people from like a psychological perspective, where I'm like bent over double on like a giant, and like I'll put him in the net and I'll be like, yes, and I'll like be screaming and have him like, cover it up as he gets in the boat and like pretend like it's a giant, and I'll open up the live well and all this stuff. You've seen guys do that probably on Bassmaster too, guy. That's I love that stuff. That was one of my favorite parts of tournament fishing, was like the mental stuff like that. Some people say you got to make a gamesmanship episode. That would be great. All the ways to mess with people in tournaments. I could make a list of like 20 ways. I used to mess with people so much. That was my favorite thing to do. I like that sometimes more than actually fishing in the tournaments. Like I would get so distracted with just screwing with people. It was so fun. But anyways, I remember I got one more story. So I was working on this. It was one of my buddies. I was fishing a tournament, and I was crushing him in practice. And first day of the tournament, I had like 19 pounds, and it was this high school tournament. And in practice, I was on so many good fish, and I knew on the last day of the tournament, everyone knew, like my partner had a really like flashy boat, and so everyone knew where we were. So what I did is on the last day of practice, we had all our fish found, and we spent 4 hours in the middle of the river channel in Lake Dardanelle throwing giant swim baits, like 6-inch paddle tail swim baits, just chunking them for hours. And we were out there for 4 hours, literally doing it just to mess with people, because we didn't have anything else to do. We had so many fish found, and we knew we were going to catch them. And you have no idea how many guys came up to us in the weigh-in line that next day, and we're like, man, were you catching him on that big swim bait? And I was like, oh yeah, man. It's like, I didn't see you out there. It's like, oh, first 25 minutes, we wrecked him. The current was on. I was just like lying through my teeth. And they thought I was catching him. And the next day, there were like 3 dudes out there because they didn't catch him. They had these swim baits on, throwing them in the middle of the river channel. It was hilarious. And we were catching him in like a foot of water in lily pads with like a frog. And they were just, oh, I love that stuff. And that's just some of the stuff that I used to do. And it only works if you catch them. That's the thing. You can only do that when you're on them. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless. So, anyways, so let's talk about the last thing here, Randy. Last one was don't fish history. That was the last thing I said. The pros do better than the average angler. That's the thing. I think the number one reason that a lot of local tournament anglers are inconsistent and not successful consistently is they fish spots where they caught them last year or last week or last month instead of fishing the moment. Right there, it says fish the moment. And pros are a lot better at not fishing history, though I'm sure that there's been times when you fished history and it's bitten you year over year. Do you have any stories about that?
Well, yeah, if you fish a lake a lot, or even if you fish like myself, I've been to so many of these lakes across the country many, many times. I mean, for example, I don't know how many times I've fished Lake Okeechobee. I probably fished 20 some tournaments there. So, I mean, and even after, if you fish a lake that you're not a local with, you get a feel for what the best areas are at certain times of the year. The key on that is you have to be able to take that information that you have from the past, and you have to be able, like you said, use it for the current situations. and you have to discard what is not going to work based upon different environmental conditions, water clarity, water temperatures, weather patterns. And if things line up and fall into that same deal, yeah, they can work, but you have to be able to, it's a fine line you have to ride to be able to say that, yeah, I need to go back in here, not necessarily because I caught them in here, but this is a really good area based upon the conditions that we have right now.
Awesome. Yeah, good stuff. We've talked about that a lot in the channel, so no need to dig too deep into that. So, Randy, you have a list of 5 things, and I want to get into that. But while you get that list prepared, I just want to run through a couple things with you guys. As always, with some stuff we have going on fishingmoment.com. So let me pull that up here. Actually, we just added something really cool, guys. I want to show you this. It is on fishingmoment.com. If you just go over to the website, and we've talked about this before, but go to fishmoment.com and then go over to the digital guides page. This is something really cool that I just added today. And what we put on here are winter bait guides. And we've had these winter bait guides on here before with just like, this is the bait to throw with the water clarity. But I didn't feel like that was good enough for you guys to really get a feel for what's going on. And so what I created were these winter bait guides for clear water reservoirs and dirty water reservoirs. And they're $15, which you might be like, why am I paying $15 for something? Well, this is why. Let me show you here. This is one of the pages, and this is basically what I put together for you guys. It's the bait based on, let's say, clear water reservoir, the water clarity, the best color to use versus the water clarity, the best weather conditions, the best structure to fish this bait on, as well as the best cover to look for. And these are based on all of the years of experience I have. And we give you 12 of these pages with different baits with different conditions. So for example, let's say you have offshore points and it's windy and cloudy, what should I throw? What type of cover should I look for? Let's say you have a post-front day, a pre-front day. What bait should you throw? What structure should you look for? What cover should you look for? And just using this bait guide, it will really help you dial in what baits to throw, what structure to fish, what cover to fish. And it's kind of like a little playbook for you when you go to the lake. So really excited about this. Again, it's just one page from it, but this is something that we put together. I think it's going to help a lot of anglers out. And so you can just head over to fishmoment.com, to the digital guides page, and check those out. You can also check out like the offshore fishing playbook. I've talked about that before. My ultimate rod guide with all the best rods, choices, stuff like that we put together. One other thing that we're doing next week is we have under the virtual seminars. We just got done doing this offshore winter seminar that took place last week, and Randy and I are going to be doing a winter crankbait seminar. That's going to be next week, next Thursday. It's a 3-hour seminar talking about how to fish wintertime crankbaits. This is one of the best ways to catch shallow winter bass, and it's a great tournament strategy. If you want to just go catch 5 big bass in the winter, throwing a flat side crankbait, wigglewort, rock crawler, lipless crankbait, all those things. And we're going to be telling you every single possible way that Randy and I can think of to catch fish in the winter on crankbaits, especially bait modifications, little secret areas we fish, all those different things. And so if you're a tournament angler and want to catch fish in the winter, this is a can't miss seminar. We're only going to be doing this one time, so make sure you check it out because we won't be doing the seminar again. The last thing is just to check out the lake breakdowns page. And on the lake breakdowns page, we've added a new thing. Obviously, we still have all the regular winter breakdowns and all the fall breakdowns for specific lakes. But we also added personal lake breakdowns. They're back, everybody. Randy will do a personal lake breakdown. He'll break down your lake specifically, give you 40 GPS waypoints on any lake of your choice across the country, and you'll receive that breakdown in 5 to 7 business days. And if you don't have your lake broken down on this list of lakes here, you can go sign up for a personal lake breakdown, and Randy will get you taken care of. So there's 4 of those available each week, only 4. They always sell out like right away, and we restock them every Monday. So now that Randy's done with the opens, he can get back after these. So definitely sign up for a personal lake breakdown if we don't have your lake and you want to get those 40 GPS waypoints from Randy. So that is that. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about, Randy, we talked about last week, is this Jewel Baits Fish Tools box. This is basically a box of fishing lures that you can get from Jewel Bait Company. And I'm just going to pull this up here. Give me 1 second, guys. This is something we talked about last week, and it's so cool. It's actually the last day you can order these to ensure you get them by Christmas. Basically, what it is it's a box of Jewel baits that I helped pick out with Jewel for wintertime fishing. And it's a $60 box of baits that you get for $35. Basically, since they're coming straight off the factory line, we can give them to you at half price. So there's no better way to purchase some really high quality American made fishing lures. All these baits are made in the United States, in Mountain Home, Arkansas. I've been to the plant, and this is where they make the Fish Moment offshore jig as well. And you can order these, again, it says order by basically tonight at midnight to ensure it gets there by Christmas. It's a great stocking stuffer. Maybe if you want to buy it for yourself to put on the Christmas tree, it comes in a box. Great Christmas gift, and you basically save $30 on fishing tackle. And it's all baits that I've handpicked to make sure that you're going to be able to get some winter bass. They're designed for winter fishing. So definitely check out this Fish Tools box. And then while you're over there, if you're picking up a fish tool box, you might as well go pick up a Fish Moment offshore jig. 2 super high quality jigs for $6.99. 2-pack for $6.99. $3 a jig. Again, we can charge a lot less for a premium skirt, premium hook, premium weed guard, because it's directly from Jewel off the factory line. No warehouse or factory markup. It's just straight price, so you can get 2 jigs for $3 a piece. Pretty solid deal. So that's all that. Don't want to take too much time plugging stuff, but any comments on any of that, Randy?
Yeah, that sounds like a great Christmas present to me, man. Just talk about a timely deal for that. So yeah, I'd be going for that. Sounds good.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a really solid deal. I really like Jewel. We're fishing their baits for a long time, and they were so cool to have helped me make my own fishing lure. Just a YouTuber making my own fishing lure, and it's an awesome bait, awesome design, and I think it's awesome that they produce everything here in Mountain Home, Arkansas. It's just everyone who's employed there is literally just from the town, Mountain Home. It's a little tiny town. There's the boat plant, Triton boat plant. It's just like a fishing community. So it's this is where fishing, the heart of fishing is right there in Mountain Home. So you're supporting the great community, supporting the great product. So I think you can't go wrong there.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to your list then, Randy. So we talked about my list, my 5 things. What are your 5 things that you would be, or that you would say,
right,
help a pro angler win?
Okay. I think the first thing, a lot of people need to, or everybody needs to understand, is that the foundation of this, in my opinion, is like that you have got to be able to recognize an opportunity when you see it and capitalize on it immediately. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole key to winning tournaments or doing good in tournaments or finishing high in tournaments. Everything else about how you get to that point sort of revolves around that, recognizing opportunities and capitalizing on them. But the list that I made up, and, I agree with all of yours, Johnny, those were really good points. But based upon, my experience, the tournaments I've won, the tournaments I've come close to winning, the tournaments I've seen other people win, here's my 5 lists. The first one would be is to have the ability to identify a winning area. Because there are very few areas on a lake that produce the size of fish that you can actually win tournaments in. And normally a lot of those areas, they're seasonal. The potential for you winning tournaments is based upon water temperatures, time of year, water visibilities, certain conditions that make a certain area of the lake the place you need to be. And professional anglers, that's one of the professional anglers that win tournaments consistently, particularly, is they have this ability to go to a lake and really identify the parts of a lake that have potential to win the tournament even before they get there. And once you do that, then you go to those areas, you can spend a lot of time in those areas, and you can, really figure out, how to catch those fish that are there. But, I'm going to guess that, just take the lake. I mean, everybody that's listening to this podcast, take your favorite lake that you fish all the time. And if you've researched a lot of the tournament wins across those lakes, you can see a pattern emerging that a lot of the tournaments get won sort of in the same portion of the lake, different times of the year. So that's the first one, is being able to identify those winning areas.
And to expand on that a little bit, Randy, I wanted to pull up an example. I think a really good example of that was when Edwin Evers won the Bassmaster Classic on Grand Lake. I think it was like 2015 or something like that. And I'm pulling up Grand Lake here on the screen. what Randy's talking about is not just the ability to pull into an area and just start catching fish right away, because that's not always how it happens. It's not like you always just pull into a spot and start ripping them. Sometimes you get into an area and you cannot catch a fish, but you have a feeling that it could be good by the time the tournament rolls around, or if you fish there long enough, you might be able to figure something out. And one really good example is on Grand Lake. Edwin Evers was fishing up the Elk River during the Bassmaster Classic, way up here, and the water was crystal clear, and you could see a bunch of big bass moving around. But while a lot of guys went in there and thought, man, that's a good-looking area, they weren't able to figure out how to get those fish to bite. And Edwin realized, because the water was really clear and shallow, you needed the wind to get these fish to fire. And so he actually didn't even go into that area the first 2 days of the tournament. He fished around a lot of other areas the first day. And the second day, he ran like way up the river up here. And the third day, he ran to the Elk River. And when he got in there, he waited until he had a windy day. The other 2 days there was no wind, so he didn't bother fishing there. But the third day he got in there, and even though he never caught a single fish in there in practice, and no one had caught fish in there in practice, he then caught 28 pounds for 5 bass out of this spot. And he'd never caught fish. He probably caught fish there in the past, but he never caught them there in practice, but he just knew that everything was setting up right there if the conditions turned on. Another great example was on the Bassmaster Classic in 2011 when Kevin Van Dam won on the Louisiana Delta, and it was in the Catawatchee Creek or whatever, or basin or something, and he said that he was fishing in this big basin on the Louisiana Delta, and in practice he caught 1 9-pounder in there, and that's it. He fished there for 2 days and caught 1 fish. But he knew if he could get in there and it turned on, he could win. And so he gambled everything on 1 9-pounder he caught. He didn't get another bite for 2 full days in there, and then blowing the tournament away in that area. So a lot of times you don't necessarily need to get bit in practice even to find those special areas. It's all about knowing that the area might develop into something special, and then gambling that it will work. Is that kind of what you're talking about too, Randy?
That's perfect, Johnny. It is, because like you said, there's knowing when an area gets right is the whole key, and being able to commit to that area if you feel that it's right. That's so important on that. Very, very good analysis on that.
So I know a little bit of tournament history. I've watched every Bassmaster show like 77 times back from like 19. Randy, I can quote like every Bassmaster quote from you from the Bassmaster, all the shows you show up in the 80s and 90s. Like I know everything. Like it's crazy. You probably don't. I know more about your Bassmaster wins than you do probably. I remember the jigs you were flipping, what the banks look like, the angle of the bank. I can remember it all.
Well, okay, here's one that'll test your memory, because it's my second point is having the ability to identify the winning techniques. And that's the whole thing about it, is once you identify the potential winning areas, if you're not keyed in on to the winning techniques, the winning baits specifically, you can't capitalize the full potential that area has to win the tournament. And I'll go back to, like you said, 2 tournaments that I didn't win, but I did lead these tournaments going in to the second and third day. I fished, and it just strikes me, because this is a good example. I've got a lot of examples, but these are 2 good examples. I fished 2 Bassmaster events on Lake Gunnersville years ago. One was the top 150, and I think the other one was the Invitational maybe. But anyway, both of these tournaments at Gunnersville, I was leading the tournament after the second day of the tournament. And the first one was I was catching these fish, slow rolling a 1-ounce spinnerbait over some deeper milfoil. And I wasn't getting very many bites at all. When I got a bite, it was a really good one, but I wasn't getting bit at all. But I could pick up at the time, like a Bomber 6A crankbait, and I could just catch the fire out of them on the 6A crankbait in the same water. But I very seldom catch a good one. They were solid keepers, but I'd very seldom catch a good one. The first day of the tournament there, I forced myself to throw that spinnerbait all day long. I didn't even take another rod out. And like at noon, I had 3 fish. I had like 3 5-pounders at noon. And instead of, going for my limit with the crankbait, I kept that spinnerbait in my hand, had 2 more bites the rest of the day, and caught almost 25 pounds that first day of the tournament, was leading the tournament. And the same thing happened when I was flipping a jig at Gunnersville in a different tournament. I could catch a lot of fish, like flipping a tube, flipping a lizard, but they were 2.5, 3-pound fish. But if I got a bite on a jig, it was a 4 or 5-pounder. That's what you have to do to win tournaments. You have to fish the techniques that have the potential to catch the big bass, and you have to commit to those techniques even through the slow periods. Because what happens is if you're fishing a bait that you're catching good fish on, whether it be like a big swim bait, big spinner bait, top water, whatever that is, and you're not getting many bites on it, but the bites that you're getting are quality fish. Every time you pick up a bait that you think is a limit filler, that takes your odds of winning the tournament down a notch. So my second point is, like I said, is having the ability to identify those winning baits and techniques and committing to those and staying with them. So,
one question I have for you, Randy, I think that would be really helpful for the audience is, how many top 5 finishes have you had in major tour events where throughout the course of the tournament you averaged more than 10 keeper bass a day? So you're catching more than 10 keeper bass a day.
That's pretty rare. I mean, most of the tournaments that I've had top 5s, top 10s in, you're not going through a lot of fish. I mean, it's just like you're going through, six to 8 bites a day would be considered a good day. A lot of times just you get your limit, or maybe not even your limit. So that's, when you're targeting big fish like that, you're not necessarily after numbers unless you're on some mega school of offshore crankbait fish back in 1996 at Kentucky Lake, something like that. But you're right. That's why winning tournaments are so hard, is because very few people have the ability to identify the best area, and they have the sort of not, I guess you call it courage, but you have the focus to stay with those low percentage big bite lures techniques.
I found, for me, when I was fishing tournaments, when I look back on it, I never won a tournament with the exception of one event where I actually caught more than like 10 keepers in that whole day. It's just something about, I always got the feeling that I was going to win a tournament when I got I would have 3 keepers in the boat by 11, and they would weigh 9 to 12 pounds. That's the type of day. It's very rare that I would pull up and catch 5 or 6 big fish right off the bat in the morning. And if I did do that, a lot of times it would be over then. I would get them all in the morning, and then it would suck the rest of the day. It's very rare that you just pull up and catch 15 5-pounders and you're culling 5-pounders. It happens every once in a while, but that's super rare. And I think that's how a lot of guys think these tournament anglers win. Especially if you haven't won a tournament before, or maybe you've just won one just because you felt you got lucky. The guys who consistently win tournaments, they are not having these dream days where you're catching 25 5-pounders. It's they're probably catching their last 5th keeper at 1:30 in the afternoon, and they're like, oh, thank God I got my number 5. That's how most of the time it goes.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to win tournaments. You got to get those big ones in the boat that when they bite. I mean, that once in a while you'll hear somebody that say they lost a big one and still won a tournament. But the difference between winning a tournament and having just a good finish in a tournament is getting those big ones in the boat. I mean, that's the whole difference. Denny Brower does not know how lucky he is. I would have won the 1998 Bassmasters Classic if I hadn't lost the 6-pounder the second day of the tournament. And, he caught a 7-pounder that third day of the tournament. He got his in, mine got off. That's the difference between winning and not winning.
That's awesome. We did get a question over here in the comments. I wanted to actually show you guys something. This is really cool. I'm working on a video right now. I've been working on it forever. And the question was, what are your top 5 tournament winning baits? And I'm actually putting together a video. I'll talk about this later. I'm pulling up an Excel file right now. People are like, why are you looking at Excel? Well, I used to be a data analyst for Walmart. So this is and Nielsen. This is my background. But what I did, and I'll talk about this in the video, I'm just kind of teasing you guys with this, is I created a spreadsheet where I basically showed what baits I use the most often, and then which of those baits produced 2.5-pound bass and 4-pound bass. And I created what I'm going to call the Big Bass Index. And it will tell you, based on how much I use the bait, what percentage of my big bass do I catch on that bait. So for example, in my football jig here, I use it 10% of the time. I fish a football jig a lot. I've caught 14% of my 4+ pound bass over the last 5 years on it. So that means that I catch more 4+ pound bass on average on a football jig than basically I would expect to, based on my usage. I'm going to explain it better in the video. I need to think about how I explain this, but this is the kind of stuff I do in my spare time, guys. I have so many data points. I literally went back through every fishing trip I could find. I had 252 fishing days that I linked the baits I was fishing and all this stuff. I know I'm kind of crazy, but this is the stuff that I do for fun. And so I'm going to be showing that video off, and I'll be making all the charts by season and all that stuff. But so for big fish baits, we'll leave it to that video because I think it's going to be cool. And I'm going to get Randy's opinion too. Maybe based more on like personal experience as opposed to like an Excel file with like 250 rows of data. But that's what I call the fishing professor, doing all the hard work creating Excel indices.
Yeah.
So anyways, next up, Randy, what's your next one?
Okay. Number 3 on my list would be getting the unexpected big bite. This is so key to winning tournaments. Unless you're fishing a smallmouth tournament like on the Great Lakes, or you're fishing like a spotted bass fishery where you're catching nothing but spotted bass. If you're in a largemouth fishery, or even a fishery that has a mix of largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass, it is almost impossible to win a tournament unless you get one of those unexpected or 2 big bites out of nowhere that you're not expecting to get. If you go back and study almost anyone that's won a tournament, and throughout the course of the tournament, at some point, they get that big one. They get that 5 to 10 pounder, depending upon the fishery, that just puts them over the top. And that's why it's so random. A lot of that is you can't target those big bites. They can just come a lot of times. This whole thing about catching a limit and then going for a big one, that rarely happens. I mean, that happens once in a while, but most of the time, it just happens out of nowhere. And that's sort of like the mysterious variable in this sport that determines a tournament win or not, is getting that big bite out of nowhere. Number 3. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing, in the tournaments you fish, Jonny, with that.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of times too in tournament fishing, and you've talked about this before, like guys who win, most of the time, if you're fishing a big tournament, let's say a 100-boat tournament, anyone in the top 5 was 1 bite away from winning. And for whatever reason, the one guy that got that big bite that day and the other guys didn't. Or maybe they lost the fish that would give them the big bite. And that's the thing about tournament fishing that's so frustrating is you may have made a cast 4 feet to the left of where a 4-pounder would bite, and you just happen to miss that cast just throughout the course of the day, and you might have been doing everything perfectly right, and you ended up with 18 pounds, and the guy who made the perfect cast maybe ended up with 19 and a half pounds. And that's one of the things I didn't like about tournament fishing. It was frustrating to me is because I like, you can see from all my Excel files, I kind of like to have that more like control of the situation a little bit more, and it's hard to wrap my head around how a lot of that success is just it's just chance to the end of the day in a lot of situations, or you could say it's meant to be, however you want to think about it. But it's very hard to wrap your head around that anyone in the top 5 of a tournament was 1 cast away, 1 bite away from winning.
Yeah, that's so critical on that. And the best thing that can happen in a tournament day is if you get that unexpected giant bite, your first bass of the day, because you know that shifts everything, that shifts your energy. You know that you can build on that. If you just catch a limit of fish with it, you got a big bag. So for me, like, God, those are just like the dream days, is when you get that giant right off the bat in the morning.
For sure.
All right. So my 4th one is it's having all the uncontrolled variables line up in your favor. And, uncontrolled variables are everything in the sport. I mean, there are a lot more uncontrolled variables that affect the outcome of the tournament than there are controlled variables. And I'm talking about your boat number draw that you have. Say you got one main lake point or one ledge or one hump that's got them stacked on it, and it's every cast. I mean, if you get boat number 1, you're gold, but if you get boat number 150 on there, you're just done. I mean, so something like that, an uncontrolled variable of the boat draw, has a huge impact on your people that win tournaments or don't. I'll go. Here's one example I'll use. Talking about that uncontrolled variable like that. I was fishing a Bassmaster Top 150 at the Potomac River years ago, and I was in second or third place going into the last day of the tournament, and I was only like a pound out of the lead, and I was just ripping them. I was catching like 30 good ones a day. I had one section of there were some old pilings, like old barge tie-up pilings that were just barely at the top of the water. You couldn't see them on high tide, but you could barely see them on low tide. And there was literally there. It was only like probably 50 feet long. It was a real short section, but with the tide coming in and out, these fish would just move in and out of there, and I was catching them all day long. I had it to myself the whole tournament. The last day of the tournament, it was a Saturday. There was a boat ramp about a quarter mile away from this particular spot, and there was a local club tournament that went out of that boat ramp on Saturday. And when I got to that spot, there were 4 boats sitting on that row of pilings that I was fishing.
Oh man.
And we can't tell them to do anything, but I just went up to these guys. I said, guys, I'm a pound out of the lead in this tournament. I'm in second or third place. I got a chance to win $100,000. This is the only place I'm catching them. I fished her all week long. I'll tell you guys what I'm catching them on. I'll give you the baits, if I can just have it. And none of them would even look at me. They wouldn't. They just kept casting. So that's what I'm talking about as an uncontrolled variable about winning tournaments. Probably would have won that tournament if I'd have got in there. Second one is the weather. Weather is always an uncontrolled variable that you have no control on. And if you find an area that's got the potential winning fish, you've got them dialed in with the bait that they want, you have got to have the weather line up in your favor in order to catch those quality fish. And a lot of times you don't know how this is going to take place because your fish may be wind dependent. They may be dependent on no wind. They may be dependent on current. They may be dependent on sunshine or clouds. And those are the things that activate those bigger fish. And if you've got a situation where those fish trigger under a certain set of conditions and in the tournaments you don't get that, then that's an uncontrolled variable that has a huge impact.
One point on that, Randy, I want to just kind of mention that because that's super interesting just from a tournament strategy perspective. Like, I remember a tournament on Sam Rayburn Lake. It was a Sam Rayburn FLW series event. And in that tournament, the guy who was leading that tournament, he was catching them throwing a deep diving crankbait in the morning. And he was crushing them first thing in the morning with the wind, the cloud cover, all those things rolling through on a 10XD. And he would get all of his bites in the first hour of the morning when that wind and the cloud cover was there. After that, he couldn't get a single bite. And then at the end of the day, another guy was catching him out of brush piles. And he was getting all of his bites from 1:30 to 3 o'clock right before check-in with the sun. And they were joking. They're like, man, if they could fish a team tournament, one guy was catching 30 pounds a day in the first hour, and another guy was catching 30 pounds a day at the end of the day. And on the last day, it was really windy and cloudy, and it gave the perfect conditions to the one guy. He won the tournament. The other guy didn't get the right conditions the last day. And it's sometimes hard because you have to find the right fish for that week. That's something that's really key. You can find winning fish, but if you didn't find the right winning fish for that week, that's a completely different deal. So it's pretty interesting.
And that's just another reason why winning tournaments are so hard is this list that I'm going through here as far as these uncontrolled variables. And the third, there's a lot of different uncontrolled variables. I'm just identifying 3 of the big ones here. The last one would be fishing pressure that we talked about.
Yep.
It is extremely, extremely rare to win a tournament in an area that's getting a lot of heavy fishing pressure. Most all the tournaments that you see won, guys they've either got something sort of by themselves or the area that they're fishing it's not getting completely hammered. And, fishing pressure just has a huge impact on that. And a lot of that fishing pressure that we're talking about is weekend pressure. When you deal with lakes like the TVA lakes, the locals on the T, and I don't mean, to diss any TVA local non-tournament fishermen out there, but the local anglers on some big impoundments across the country, specifically the TVA impoundments, they've impacted the results of tournaments so many times simply because of fishing pressure. I've had it happen to me several times too. Everybody has. So fishing pressure is one of those things that you can't deny. It has a huge impact, whether it be recreational weekend fishermen, other tournament fishermen. So Anyway, to sum it up again, you got to have those uncontrolled variables line up, specifically your boat draw, the weather, and the fishing pressure. That's number 4.
It's kind of crazy, Randy, because the last two factors, like I talked about specifics of like, focus on your strengths, being more efficient, and the stuff that you're calling out for the keys to tournament success. Two of them are completely out of your control, like the getting the right breaks on the fish, and then getting all the other uncontrolled variables going your way. And that's 2 of your 5. So that just kind of shows how hard it is to win a tournament when 2 of the most important factors you literally can't even control. You just have to go out and just hope it works. So
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
And that is why nobody can consistently win tournaments. I mean, nobody can do it. You have tournaments line up where guys, they may have 2 or 3 tournaments that line up in their wheelhouse, and they get all these stuff lining up, and they may win a tournament or 2 in a row, but it never happens season after season after season. Nobody does that.
Mm-hmm.
And my last one would be key to winning a tournament is committing to the area that you're fishing once you realize that it's got all the right elements. And the key to committing to an area, it sounds easier than what it is, because what happens is almost every single tournament that you go to, even the ones that you're on them good, is you have periods during the day where you have bite windows. And a lot of times these bite windows, they can be tiny or they can be a little bit longer. But the hardest thing for tournament anglers to do is if you have these real small bite windows and then the rest of the time is just dead time or you're not catching anything, it's really hard to not want to bail out and go to different areas that you feel might be more productive. But once you do that and you pull yourself off of those winning fish and those winning areas, you reduce your odds to winning that tournament. So almost every single tournament I've won, most all the tournaments I see getting won are guys that are committing to a specific area or a specific small portion of the lake, and they're fishing through those bite windows, and they're there when those bite windows happen. And that's one of the biggest tips that I could leave with anyone tonight is that you have to be in your best water during the prime conditions. Those prime conditions can be a list of different things. It could have to do with moon phases. It can have to do with different feeding periods, weather conditions, light penetration, wind, everything like that. But until you learn an area on a real intimate level, you don't really understand what those bite windows are. So that's the hardest thing. But those are my 5. Those are from what I've seen, has a big impact in them. But
that's awesome. That's good stuff, Randy. I think between our 2 lists, we gave you guys a lot of good tips on how to do well in tournaments. The biggest thing, though, is it's putting all 10 of those things together in one day. That's the challenge. That's what no one has figured out, because if they did, they would have been winning every single tournament. Some guys get in the zone, they get really dialed in, and I think that's part of it. You have to get in that right mental state where you trust your decisions. But I think it's very easy, too. I see a lot of guys, they get in that run where they just win everything for like a year or 2, maybe like KVD in 2006 to like 2010. He was winning everything. 2012, even like 6 years, or Skeet Reese was in that zone. But then after you leave that zone, it's really hard to get back into it, because it's all about trusting your decisions and just kind of being in tune with the fish. Plus, doing all the right things. Maybe they had advantage in technology, an advantage in baits, an advantage in other things that added to that, which I know, like, KVD, he was using side imaging from Humminbird before most people even knew what that was, and that helped him find a ton of fish, and they were doing a lot of summertime tournaments. So, like, there were things that lined up on top of all that, and nowadays with social media, live, Bassmaster Live and everything like that, it's really hard to get something to yourself for more than, like, one tournament, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely so. And I've always thought, this nobody has really emerged in the sport of fishing that has been a dominating force in winning tournaments. I always thought that Takahiro Moray probably was the best candidate for somebody to really transcend that and get on a completely different level, because he doesn't do anything but fish. I mean, he's single. He doesn't have a family. He's fanatically committed to the sport. I've been to his house before down there at Lake Fork, and he has in his house all over in every. This is how hardcore Takahiro is. Every room in his house, he has these overhead bright fluorescent lights, like the big long tubes. And I go, Takahiro, why do you got these, fluorescent lights in every house, every room? He goes, what if I want to work on my tackle in my living room? Then I can see. What if I want to work on my tackle in my kitchen? Then I can do that. He was so fanatical about, his mind was completely focused on tournament fishing that, he even went to that extent. So if somebody like Takahiro can't do it, I don't think we're ever going to have anyone that just dominates the sport and wins everything all the time. It's just not going to happen.
For sure. And that's another reason why it's tough to be a tournament fisherman, because it isn't there's no certainties. It's not like you can train and get everything in the perfect situation and then succeed. There's so many factors that go into it that a lot of times success from one angler to another is just left up to, I wouldn't say chance, but it's getting the right break at the right time. There's a lot to it. I mean, obviously the fishermen who are more skilled have a better chance of getting the breaks to fall their way. Putting yourself in position to be fortunate is important, but there still is that aspect, which is always challenging. And I felt like when I was growing up fishing, I always got the wrong shake in big tournaments. I have so many second place finishes or third place finishes like national championships, big events, and I realized, you know what? I've never had any of the things like the fish flops the wrong way when I flip it in the boat and it comes off, or I always break off the one fish that I don't need to break off. And I just kind of came to the realization for me that was I was not getting the breaks. That was not going to be a fruitful career for me if I keep getting the bad breaks. So one cool question here that John put in is, will there ever be a dominant female angler on tour? I've always talked about this. There is zero reason why a female angler could not be dominant on tour. There's no physical advantage, really. There's no mental advantage to being a man or a woman. There's no tangible reason. It's literally just, I don't think there's as many women who are serious to spend all their time fishing that have come up and wanted to do it at that level. And I don't know if that's just, I don't know why, but I literally can't see a reason why there wouldn't be a dominant female angler, and I feel like it'll happen at one point. It's just someone who gets eaten up with it and wants to take it to that level, because it is a lifelong endeavor. You need to be doing it 200 days a year, sleeping, eating, breathing, thinking, fishing if you're going to be a pro. And it just there hasn't been someone like that, but I feel like it will. What do you think, Randy?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's no reason why that person can't emerge. I mean, women have a lot more intuition. They have a better feel. Their hands are more sensitive, that type of stuff. But I think that it goes back to what you said. I don't think there's been a female angler out there emerge that had that unbelievable passion and desire and willing to sacrifice and do what it takes to completely commit to it. I mean, one of the anglers I'm really impressed with, Trey Zaldane, I've known her for years, and she is a super, super intelligent. She understands bass. She understands the subtleties of bass fishing. She's versed in everything. She's passionate. She's committed to it. But she also she's a business person too. She has a lot of things that pulls her attention away on the business side of it. But you're right. We haven't seen that yet, and one day that person may emerge for sure.
For sure, and like with Trey, like she has rods in Walmart and stuff like that, and she can make a really good living without having to go all in to try to fish to win with checks. She can win on other avenues, social media, stuff like that. And if you can do that, honestly, that's a way more secure and consistent way to make a living fishing. And if you can still do what you love and get paid to do it, I mean, honestly, you don't have to go through those avenues. So it's smart sometimes not to go all the way in, because it's like we've shown, it's not always going to be the most consistent approach. So again, it's just going to take the right situation to line up. But I mean, there's literally no reason why it couldn't happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, so let's see here. Let's go through a few more comments here. We have a few more minutes. I'm just trying to roll through some of these comments. What are your plans then for next season, Randy? We had a question about that. What are your plans for next season, given the opens and all that stuff, fish the moment? What are your thoughts there?
Well, that's a lot of it depends. There's always an outside chance Bass will open up the Legends exemptions, and I get in the Elite Series. That's happened before, so they haven't announced the Open schedule next year. Jonny and I have talked about it as far as we may fish a team circuit together here in Missouri. I'll definitely be fishing probably some of the Opens. Just have to see what the schedule folds out for, but I'm sort of like Johnny. It's like I'm getting where I really enjoy what we're doing with Fish the Moment. All the teaching that we're doing. We got so much stuff going on here, with the channel, with the YouTube channel and the website, and I love it. I mean, it's like, it's something I enjoy. It's fun to me. I can spend time at home and still do it. So it's, the more that, I get involved with Fish the Moment, the less I want to get out and drive across the country and fish. But we'll just have to see what the schedule's like coming out.
For sure, and I'm excited to have you in more videos. I'm sure everyone here is willing to, not see you in tournaments and get all that juicy tournament info. Because if you're not competing, Randy, you can let all of the cats out of the bag. You can give us all the juice, and I think people will really like that. You don't have to hold anything back anymore. And don't worry, guys. If it happens, I will get every secret out of Randy. It will be on YouTube, or it'll be in a seminar. It'll be somewhere, so don't worry. One more question I was getting from Ryder. He's asking, he says, I have the live scope in 360. If so, do you get interference running them both at the same time? I do not get any interference. I run live scope and 360 at the same time. I don't know how that works. I had the Bass Tank actually set up my electronics. They got it all organized for me. I'm not great on the install part. I know how to interpret them, but it's kind of like I'm like the race car driver. I can drive the race car really well. I just couldn't put it back together and do all the fine tuning and stuff like that. That's not my deal. I just know how to make the race car go. So that's kind of how I think about it. Awesome. So one more thing before we get going here. Just want to remind you guys that we posted onto fishthemoment.com a couple different things. First, under our virtual seminars, we have the upcoming winter crankbait seminar that Randy and I'll be doing. Also, we just added the personal lake breakdowns that Randy will be doing. He can pick out 40 GPS waypoints on your home lake, and we have all of our stock map breakdowns you can look through first. But if your lake isn't here, then he can break down your lake, whatever lake you want, 40 GPS waypoints you can put straight on your fish finder, and it's a really good deal there. We've done them in the past, and we'll restock those every single Monday. We do 4 a week. And then we also just posted some new winter bait fishing or bait guides, winter bait guides for clear water reservoirs and dirty water reservoirs. And basically, you are able to get a look at what baits Randy and I fish, the top 12 baits for clear water and dirty water reservoirs, the best weather conditions, water clarity, the best structure to fish, and the best cover. So awesome look at what baits we throw, the conditions. Obviously, these conditions change based on the bait and the areas and all that stuff change. There's 12 different scenarios that really help you dial in when and where you should be fishing and the best baits. And those are available, again, on fishthemoment.com, and that's under the digital guides page. So definitely check out that stuff. And then also make sure to head over to jewelbait.com to check out the Fish the Moment offshore jig back in stock. And it's 2 jigs for $6.99. Awesome price. And then we also have the Fish Tools Christmas box to help put together. And you get $60 worth of baits for $35 in this box, basically because they're coming straight off the production line, no retail markup, and so we can give you super high quality made in America baits for $35, and they come in a nice box you can put under the Christmas tree, and awesome little deal. And if you order literally by tonight, you can get them guaranteed by Christmas. So if you want to get a great Christmas gift for yourself or for a fishing someone, if there's wives or husbands who have fishermen in the family and they want to get a gift for their husband or wife, buy the fish tool box. Just do it. You're listening to this. If they're listening to this live stream, they're serious about fishing an hour in. Get the fish tools box, put it under the Christmas tree, wrap it up. It's already in a box. You don't have to worry about it. And I picked out the baits with Jewel so we know they're good for winter fishing. So great way to do that. And again, thanks guys for joining the stream. Hopefully it was very helpful. And all those tips are going to help you guys become better tournament fishermen. And John is in the live stream over here saying, or their live chat saying, leave a like on the video. There's 286 of you guys. Before you close out this video, if you could just go down there and press the like button at the bottom of the screen once you close out the video, just hit the like button. It would really help push this video out to more people, and it would really help out the channel. So it'd be awesome if you could just leave a like. And anything else, Randy, you got before we close up for the night?
Yeah, just thanks for joining in, everybody, tonight. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. And like I said, once again, we'd like to invite you to do that the winter crankbait virtual seminar with us next week. It's going to be a really good deal. Fishing here in the Ozarks like Jonny and I do, we have a lot of experience on all the different crankbait profiles, applications for them, conditions that they work the best. And I think it's going to be really interesting because a lot of people don't really associate crankbaits with hardcore winter fishing, but we're going to really show you how to change that perspective a little bit.
Awesome, good stuff. And thanks so much, Ryan Williams, for the $9.99 super chat. Really appreciate that. Helps us get, I can get another half tank of gas in the boat, which is very good. Get out and do some more fishing, which is awesome. Appreciate that, guys. And I really appreciate all the support on fishmoment.com on the live stream. We're going to be doing a little bit a throwback, Randy, some videos. I have a video coming out on Friday I think you guys are going to love. And it's I'm spending a lot of time on this video, and I want to get your opinion on these new styles. I'm kind of wanting to go back to the old Fish Moment style where I used to put like 3 weeks into the video while like doing my undergrad and my graduate school, and I would like spend hours doing graphics, like 40 hours editing. And I'm gonna make a couple videos like that with my new and improved skills, some new stuff. So look out for some really cool videos coming up, and let me know in the comments of those videos when you watch them if you like that style. And Randy has a bunch of videos on his YouTube channel, Intuitive Angling with Randy Blockett, and we also have our social media pages. And if you do want to listen to any of the Fish the Moment YouTube videos as well as the live streams, you can listen to them on the podcast, iTunes podcast app, as well as Spotify podcast, and you can just subscribe and download the podcast, download the videos, and most of the videos we put out are like 20 to 30 minutes long. They're perfect to listen to while driving to work, while driving to the lake, just all around. And so all of our content's going to be posted, the audio, on the Fish the Moment podcast, so definitely check that out. So other than that, guys, thanks for checking out the live stream. Thanks for sticking around. 260 people sticking around to the very, very end. Always appreciate it. Randy, thanks again for joining me for the stream.
See you guys later.
Yeah, have a great night.